technical problems. I don't have a professional studio. I'm hoping I may invest in one or something similar, but until then, this is the best you're going to get. Hi everyone. Can someone just let me know that everything's fine, that you can hear me, as and then I can do the introductions. Do you like my map? Look at my map.
I've got some of those.
Yeah. When you know, you know. Yeah, love it. Guess what? I've got no comments coming through. Oh, it just gets better, doesn't it? Oh, there it is. Sounds good. Super. The sound is fabulous. Excellent. Right. Well, again, I'm here today on Saturday, the 25th of January, and what a strange day that it's the alignment you were saying about the so-called planet alignments. I don't know. When you don't believe in planets, what could be aligning?
Well, I think it's a lot of planets don't normally line up, and it's just this particular
something's definitely
day
aligning.
There's a lot of alignment.
And I'm here discussing or having just a conversation with the wonderful Alan. People might know him as Alan of Salisbury, so I'm going to turn the camera around. It's going to be focus on Alan, and we're just going to have a chat, and he's going to speak about Magna Carta and the true heart of law.
That's not me.
And that's not that's Alan's
probably
phone.
me. Let me turn that off.
There we go. And yeah, just putting the phone on mute. I can, excellent. I'm glad everyone can hear me fine, and you can hear Alan fine. I spoke to Alan a few days ago, and he's been busy reading, locking himself away. You've locked yourself away for a number of days. And you've decided to share the knowledge that you've gained about what you've been reading, which is to do with the Magna Carta and the true law that we should be invoking.
Well, yeah. I mean, the first thing is that it's not only the Magna Carta. I've been reading lots of history books, and some people ask me, I was doing a talk the other day, they say, well, how do you know what to research? You know, do you go to the library or whatever? And it's I don't. I've realized fairly recently that there are other ways of doing things, and we were talking about the way working class blokes get things together, and it goes back a very long way, because we lived in a society where we used to have like druids, bards and warriors. And I've been told, and I can't really argue, that I am a bard. And what does that mean? That basically means that if you're really passionate about something and you really want to learn it, and you stay heart-centered, which being heart-centered means you're in alignment with your authentic self, okay, and that's who you really are, then whatever you want to do with passion is going to manifest in front of you. The universe is going to manifest something in front of you. It might be just the direction to where you need to go, or it might be the solution, or it might be a book, or something you've had all the time. You know, it might be something that's been around your house for a while that you pick up and look again, and it starts to make more sense than it used to. But as long as you stay heart-centered, then it will fall into place. And most of my life, as I said in the car, I was coming over here. I'm a working class bloke. I worked with the cable ships. I worked in sawmills, and you know, in those days we were supposed to retire at the age of 60. Men were working in mines and all this kind of stuff, and there was great camaraderie. We get our wages in a brown envelope, you know, and it was all cash money, and we didn't have bank accounts, you know. So that's the way things were. But if we had a problem, we didn't have the money, we couldn't throw money at it and the problem would get solved. We had to sit down and figure out how to do it, and if we did that with heart and passion, generally it would be okay. We'd come across a guy that knew how to fix it, or whatever it is, we knew someone or whatever. So, and that's the way I'm, like a self-taught musician. I kind of gave up working for, it was the GPO, and then it became BT. and I moved down the red light area with a German artist in Southampton, and because I didn't know what being a musician meant, but I knew I couldn't do it while I was still working on with the boats, you know. And so I jacked it in, and that was when stuff started to begin. So that the important thing is, and with a lot of working class blokes, men and women, is that maxim, to thine own self be true, to be true to yourself, which means to be heart-centered.
Yeah.
And that's where everything, again, this is in alignment, where your gut is in alignment with your heart, is in alignment with your head. And then you know that whatever it is that's going on, it has to be true. And if it's true, that's never going to change. And if it does change, well, then it obviously wasn't true in the first place.
I've spoken about this, funny enough, in a few of my videos or podcasts recently, that the power of the universe, or the universe, will give you what you ask for. And so when your intention is genuine, and people go, no, it doesn't work, you can't manifest your reality. And I believe that's because people are not, like you say, being true to themselves, because they're not aligning their mind, their heart and their stomach, and they're not coming from a genuine place. And I think this is what the importance is, as to what you're saying, is you have to be, you have to walk and act and feel and be everything that you are, true to you.
Yeah, this is absolutely key. It's about being authentic, who you are, warts and all, you know, not hide anything. This is, you know, what you see is what you get, and that's it. You know, and then everybody knows what's going on. There's no deception or self-deception there. And this is literally, and people might raise a few eyebrows here when I say the law is heart-centered. I guess most people today would go, well, I've experienced with the law and it's got anything but heart-centered. But the law is absolutely heart-centered, and it's based on empathy. And empathy, you can only have empathy if you are your original self, your authentic original self. And that's absolutely important, because empathy is our check and balance. For each one of us as an individual, if we are empathic, you know, we have the ability to put ourselves into the situation of another, and which is what empathy is, and say, what would I have done in that situation? Then we're doing exactly what is required of a jury. If you're a member of a jury, that's what you're doing. Empathy is the most essential ingredient, that each of those 12 members of the jury are, you know, their authentic self, and they have the capacity of empathy. And what's more, they've got no axe to grind. They're completely impartial. And so whatever's presented to them, they put themselves into that situation, and they go, well, what would I have done in that situation? And so, and this is all written in the Magna Carta, but unfortunately, and I've been researching again the Magna Carta. I did this with John Harris a long time ago, and we fell for the deceptions of what it actually is. The first thing is the translations. The translations we have of the Magna Carta, if you go, say, like to the British Museum, what you're getting from the British Museum is like you're getting the news from the BBC.
Right.
So that's what you're getting. You know, so take.
It's not accurate.
Well, it's like the news is on the BBC.
Yes.
They're telling you certain things, and they're
missing
not
out very
exactly.
key points.
Now, when you look at the time the Magna Carta was written, and it's really important that you have to realise that these barons didn't just sit round it in 1215 and come up with all this stuff off the top of their heads. The contents of the Magna Carta, as far as I can make out, went on at least 1,000 years before it was written. People didn't write things down then. They did what a lot of working class people and regular people do today. They learnt stuff off by heart.
Yeah.
You know, that's knowing stuff. In fact, the Druids used to say to the Romans, the only reason you write stuff down is so you can forget it.
Yeah.
You know, so, and everybody was illiterate then, more or less. And so there wasn't any other option. That's how you learned stuff. You learned it off by heart. All the trades that you had was like a one-to-one with the tradesman, and that's how you learned stuff.
Yeah.
You know, and it was learnt by heart. So there was a certain pride in what you got. I mean, for example, you look at a building these days, you'll see plastered over it the corporation that made it. You know, go, apologies for any inconvenience from, you know, McAlpines or whatever is out there. Can you see any of that around those old cathedrals?
No.
Can you see any names of people that put their name to all the craft that they did that?
No.
Not one. Not one. And you have to say, well, why? Create something like that and not want the credit for it.
Yeah.
Because if you go back into the old craft days, you were doing that before your idea of what the creator was. That was the only thing that mattered. It wasn't about impressing people around you. That was kind of taken as a given because people really knew you, and that was a community. You were connected, and the most important thing about connection is having this capacity of empathy. Empathy is essential to connect with each other, but also with nature and the environment around us. You know, empathy is the check and balance. And that's why empathy is the law.
Yes.
That is the heart-centered thing of the law, and that brings us back to the juries. And when we go into the Magna Carta, or the Great Charter, when it was written down, I've got a number of, and this is just my stuff, you know.
Yeah.
So I indulge this bard. That's my qualification. If people want to examine my qualifications, they can, and they can listen to my music and decide for themselves whether I'm qualified or not.
Yeah.
But just because stuff is written down doesn't mean to say that's when it was created. For example, you look at the Beatles, they couldn't read or write a note of music.
Right.
They learned everything off by heart, and they played everything off by heart. And just because stuff is written down doesn't mean that it makes it more valid than stuff that isn't written down.
That's right. Yeah.
You know, and people forget this, and when they forget this, they forget who they are.
Yes.
You know, they forget their potential, and this is what's really important, especially if you want to literally understand the word, to stand under the law, to understand the law as it is in true, the law that is true. And the law that is true, as written in the Magna Carta, preserved in posterity, is basically all you get is a trial by jury of your peers, or a jury trial, if you want to put it that way round, because I know people will split the difference around that, so we can call it a jury trial. Because in a democracy means people, and cracy means sovereign. So everyone's equal. You've heard the expression, everyone is equal under the law. And also, no one is above the law.
Yep.
All right, these are facts of law, at the heart of the law. You can't argue with them. You know, there are rules, standards, bars, and maxims that remain uncontested over time. So nobody is above the law, and everybody is equal in the law. Why? Because they're sovereign. And if anybody does anything to betray a sovereign, that's the definition of the word treason.
Yeah.
Whether it's 1,000 sovereign, you know, 1 million or 70 million sovereign, it's still treason. To betray sovereigns is treason. Right, that's the interpretation of it. So the first thing the jury do is it has to be compiled. So it's compiled of the peers, in other words, the likeness. So the whole law is fully floating, no matter where you were born, what standard you were, or in society was. You get your peers, and you get to choose who your peers are, who's going to judge you.
Yep.
And basically, you're judged by your peers, and you get 12 individuals. You could say, well, maybe 12 stars, signs of the zodiac, different personalities, whatever you want to, that magic number, 12 disciples, all that stuff. And I'll get to that in a minute, the history of that, where that comes from. but basically you're judged by your peers. And the first thing the jury's got to do is decide whether you had malicious intent or not. Because if you had malicious intent, then what you've done is criminal.
Yes.
Okay, but if you didn't have any malicious intent, then how can you be guilty? It's not guilty. So malicious intent equals guilt. You're guilty. You're a wronging. You're out of order. Or if you didn't know what you were doing, you know, it was an accident or whatever, so you hadn't. In other words, there's no evidence for malicious intent, then you're not guilty. However, that doesn't mean to say, you know, you might have caused harm or loss. Okay, and this is the next thing the jury has to do. Is the jury is they're the guys that come up with the sentence.
Yeah.
Because they can sentence their peer.
Yeah.
So they know whether it's going to be punitive, a punishment, or they know what's realistic if they want this guy to make amends for an accident. And if the guy happens to be not guilty and he doesn't need to make an events, then the jury are going to say, well, what's he here for then? And that's when, you know, your government or whatever it is comes in and says, well, we made this law and our law enforcement say they brought him before you. And so then the jury say, well, what we're here now, we've tried him, he's not guilty. He doesn't have to make any amends. So now we're going to try the law. If that law, that acts, that statute, that instrument is unjust, then we can annul it. Those 12 jury members say, right, that law is annulled. And there's no redress for that. That's absolute. You can't. So, for example, if we have the government want to put a law, I mean, this is really huge, because if we go back to 1215 and we look at the Magna Carta as being a signpost that says this is the direction you need to go, this is the law, you make a right turn there, and as long as you keep on that road, or as long as you keep this together, everything will be fine.
Yeah.
But what a lot of people forget, that at the same time, at the same year, the four inns of the Temple Bar were founded in the city of London.
Right.
Okay, so there's your counterbalance. So on the one hand, they're saying, oh, look, we've got Magna Carta here.
Yes.
But on the other hand, they're going, yeah, but we've got the four inns of the Temple Bar. And so the next question should be, well, why was that founded then?
Yes.
So let's go back to what was happening in 1215 and 1216. The country was being invaded by Louis and Philip of France. It was literally being invaded, and half the barons were siding against psychopath King John at the time. They betrayed him, which is treason. They're betraying their sovereign to let a foreign prince or principality come in and take over the country. Even under Acts, the 1887 Treason and Felony Act is to allow a foreign prince or principality to take control or have sway over the laws of this country. Okay, that is treason. Treason, all right? So can you see where, according to the Magna Carta, this is going? This is a treason against the people. So at the same time, what you had is you had this invasion going on, and there were basically two significant guys that was checking this invasion. One is the famous William Marshall, who was the Knight of Knights, who's buried in the Temple Bar in London. And he was getting on in those days. He might have been in his 70s, but he is like your knight's knight. He's one of the few people that have been written about. His family got scribes to write about his life story. That's quite rare at that time. And then the other guy is another guy called William. He's called William of Cassingham, and he came from like North Weald and that. And basically, it would take a whole interview to go through the story. But what happened is in the city of London, they didn't side with the king. They sided against the king. They decided with the French, and they decided with the invasion. And you've got to remember that people were getting raped, their property was getting burnt, the French were drinking all the wine and all the other stuff, going, this is ours again, because they were all mercenaries. And the church were in on it. The church had signed the signatories in the Magna Carta. But what happened was, long story short, William of Cassingham did kind of like a guerrilla tactic against Philip Philip, when he was running out of money and going back to France to get a bit more dosh, and of course, who was he going to get the dosh from? The monarchies would borrow money from the church. That's where they got their stuff from. So, you know, but and then we'll get back to this so-called Christian thing. But he was trapped, and his army got trapped, and in the end, he more or less got all the south of England up to about Bridport, and up on the east coast, all East Anglia up out into the Wash. That's what Philip had got. So he'd nearly won. He'd nearly invaded England successfully, but he had to go back to get a bit more dosh, and his army got trapped by William of Cassingham. That was when William Marshal instigated a battle in Lincoln and defeated him. So that basically defeated the invasion. And nobody tells you this at school. They don't want to tell you this.
Yeah.
So basically, the City of London, 4 Inns of the Temple Bar, right? They were traitors. Yeah. Absolutely, no doubt about it. And the clergy. In fact, it was a member of the clergy, a pastor, that welcomed Philip ashore, blessed him as he came ashore, the invader coming ashore. And this is really interesting because when we get to the, as I've explained, what the law is according to the Magna Carta, it's a jury trial, period.
Yeah. No
administrative courts, anything like that. Anything coming out of the Temple Bar is a foreign prince or principality. Is the City of London the country? No, it's a foreign prince or principality. What's the law that comes out of the City of London? The 4 Inns of the Temple Bar. That's a foreign law, prince, principality. That's what we're living under.
Yeah.
Right. I'm just telling you what the law is. I'm not.
Yeah.
You know. This is it. So you've got, on the one hand, if you want the right-hand path of Magna Carta, what the law had been at least for 1,000 years before, and I can go into the history of that to prove that, and that magic number 12. And then we've got this 4 Inns of the Temple Bar, maritime law kind of gig coming in there at the same time.
Yeah.
So anyway, basically, John dies, and his lad, I think it's Henry, he was only 9 years old. And William Marshal, he, again, does his amazing thing. I mean, he's really worth reading about, this guy. If you want to get into the history, it's really important. But also William of Cassingham as well. Now, William of Cassingham, we don't know that much about. And I think there's a certain amount of jealousy and envy amongst the nobility there, because a lot of them betrayed the king. They committed treason.
Treason.
You know, so...
It seems to repeat in history all the time, because this is exactly what...
Exactly. Well, so let's look at this thing that I've hinted about before in terms of this heart-centered bit. Heart-centeredness and empathy is when you've got, you know, your life is lived by your heart with passion. I mean, when I used to teach music, I'd say you just need 3 things. You need to be heart-centered, passionate about it, and passion beats discipline. The only reason you need discipline is when your passions run out and you've got to do the gig. And it's the same if you're a working class bloke. You do the job and that's like, I've run out of passion for it. And then you have to employ discipline to finish the job on time to get it done. You know, that's why you need a charge hand or a bosun or whatever it is if you're on the boats or whatever to make sure you turn to in the morning and sort stuff out. You know, and it's heart-centered and you know it's right. You can't argue with it because that's just the way it is. Everybody agrees on it. It's a jury.
Yeah.
And that's the jury. And the whole point is that there are 3 copies, or were 3 copies of the Magna Carta. One is in where I come from, Salisbury Cathedral. And the one is in Lincoln, which is where the final battle that William Marshal did to defeat the French there. I mean, we sent them back with their tails between their legs, big time, you know. But William Marshal, again, you see, William Marshal... Although John was a psychopath, absolutely, William Marshal was in honour because his honour was towards the office of the monarch. And although he was a 9-year-old boy, I mean, a lot of people say, well, just let Philip have it. Most of them are bloody French anyway. So, well, let's just let Philip have it. And William, no. He's the monarch. He's all right. He's a 9-year-old boy, but my allegiance is to the monarch. You know, that's the whole thing, because the monarch swears allegiance to the people and the people are sovereign. That's the way that it works. If you look at all the coronation oaths,
Yeah.
they swear, they're the sovereign, or all the people are sovereign, everybody's equal, but you get one, the first amongst equals, that takes on the commitment of the sovereign people. All this subject nonsense, that's coming much later. That's part of the word magic from the other guys in the City of London, and their influence, the Temple Bar, the word magic that goes through there, which is what I go through in some of the other talks with the Shakespeare stuff.
Yeah.
So what you have then, and before I kind of like, I wanted to just hint a bit on the church. There is absolutely no reason that the church was signatories to the Magna Carta, that every, say, once a month in church, your priests and everything, they used to read the Bible out because everyone was illiterate. They went, right, today I'm going to read out your Magna Carta because you guys are all jury members and this is your responsibility and this is your duty as jurors. So I'm just going to remind you what your rights are as enshrined by Magna Carta. Did they do that?
Never.
Never, ever, ever, ever. That's treason.
Interesting.
Okay, so let's see what happened. Let's fast forward to 1381 at the so-called Peasants' Revolt. Now, if those peasants would have known about Magna Carta,
Yeah.
okay, they could have had a jury trial, convene a jury trial and say, look, this guy, William Gorn, or all these now, because remember the main people that lost their heads in the Peasants' Rebellion, two groups more than anybody else, were the clergy and the lawyers.
Yes.
Right, those are the ones that are there. It wasn't so much the people had the gripe against the barons, they had the gripe against the church and the lawyers. So there you've got a hint that the people knew in their heart who the wrongins were.
Yeah.
But they didn't know how to prosecute them under Magna Carta because the church and the lawyers, because they were coming up with legal and law are entirely different things, as John Harris used to say. Never the twain shall meet. And of course the legal guys, they say, oh, well, it's law, it's kind of like, it's the colour of law.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's all deception. Law and legal are entirely different things. In the 1893 Encyclopedia Britannica, legal is defined as the undoing of God's law. It's unnatural. It's, according to Magna Carta, it's treason on a lot of grounds.
Yes.
Because firstly, it's a foreign prince or principality. The City of London is not the country. Why are we following rules as dictated to by a bunch of guys that owe their allegiance to a foreign country? I'm just saying that's what it says in the Magna Carta.
Absolutely.
And if anything, when we look at what's called rebellion, the rebellion isn't people that want to uphold the law, the heart-centered law, as the people in this country know the difference between right or wrong, and that goes into a jury, and that's the jury trial, and they go through all of that stuff. There are no judges, there are just conveners. So it makes perfect sense. So any law or act, statute, instruments or bylaw can be annulled by a jury. And the first option, a right of any, and I use the term, using some lawyer speak now, advisedly, someone who defines themselves as being an Englishman under Magna Carta. And they kind of, I know that people are going to disagree with me about this definition of English, but under law, that is their right. Everyone has a right as a sovereign to a trial by their peers. Whoever denies that right is committing treason. Now, that's what it says.
Yeah.
There's no ifs or buts about it. It's clearly defined, and that's why they don't want you to know about it.
So because obviously, Alan, you have gone, right into the studies, and it's so admirable. But for someone who wants this in simple terms, what they've done, by my understanding here, is they've taken the Magna Carta, and these very clever people have decided they can't hide it, but they can make you follow a different path rather than the path of the true Magna Carta, which is trial by jury by your peers, which is based on empathy. What they've done is they've kind of enticed you to the different path, which is the path of now what we now have as legal.
Yeah, that's it. It's basically they've created. Well, it's the fiction, and this is where the psychology bit comes in, of which I'm also qualified, to say.
Well, we can talk about that because there's a few things I'd like to ask you about.
Yeah, I know. I thought you would in terms of that. Yeah, but I will do that now. I worked for a number of years in clinical institutions, mainly rehabs treating addiction.
This could be a long podcast, so I hope everyone's got their
okay. So
drinks.
And this is where we come back. And now I called King John a psychopath.
Yes.
Right. So if we're going to shift into the psychology bit, let's do that now. There is a in terms of lay psychology, and I had to do this when I did the talk on William Shakespeare last summer. I had to give a quick sort of crash course in lay psychology. And that basically is there's a kind of rule of a thumb, and that it is as follows: is all psychopaths are narcissists, but not all narcissists are psychopaths. Psychopaths are born. In other words, there's a genetic part to psychopathy, but narcissists are created. They're created by trauma. Okay, so if you want to check out psychopathy, I would really recommend a neurosurgeon. His name is James Fallon, Fallon, and he is a pro-social psychopath. And he worked with the American criminal justice system, and he was taking scans of people's brains, obviously psychopaths, and he found a singular common denominator amongst all the images that he took. So you can actually tell by a brain scan whether somebody is a psychopath or a narcissist. So there is a test, a little scan that can prove you, because these people are really good at deception.
Yeah.
They are and I'll get they are actors. That's the polite way of saying it. So basically, how do you create a narcissist? Well, if you want to maintain the bloodline, and they're never going to look at it because all psychopaths are narcissists, they're never going to see themselves as having a certifiable mental health disorder, which of what these are. They're part of a group as defined in the Diagnostic Statistical Manual number 5 as being in the spectrum of cluster B pathology. That's the technical thing for it if you want to check that out. But the common denominator for all of them in that spectrum of cluster B pathology is they have zero empathy.
Yep.
All right, so they're absolutely without empathy. And normally what happens in terms to create a narcissist is really quite tragic. From the ages of being born to the age of 7, and again, let's echo what the Jesuits say, give me the child from 1 to 7 and I'll show you the man or I'll show you the woman. If you traumatize people or of that age and you demean them or you abuse them, then their self-esteem becomes so low that they're able to abandon themselves because they believe that who they are isn't worth it.
Yeah.
It's not worth it. So what they do then is they kind of like, if you look at your authentic self, and I'll try and keep it in psychological terms, that's who you are, your authentic self. You give that up or you suppress that, and if you want to look at your authentic self as being your soul, then you abandon that or you sell that.
Yep.
Right, then you're left, that's your heart-centered thing, that's gone, the light's gone out on that. But what you have got is the intelligence up here. And what you do with that is exactly what an artificial intelligence does.
Yes.
It data mines from the environment that it's in.
Yes.
And it creates a persona and person means like a mask.
Mask,
It's there's nothing behind the mask. It's a persona that is going to be able to survive in that environment. That's the first thing.
Which is a bit of a fight or flight, isn't it? It's adapting to your environment.
It is. So basically, you've lost your authentic self, and now you've just got the intelligence, because these people are incredibly clever. They're very much in their heads. So they data mine, and the way they do it, and this is really key. If I'm the psychopath, or I'm the narcissist, and I want to feed, I get in the environment. Say I want to, I'll get really interested in you. It's the term is called love bombing. I'll love bomb you, and you think, wow, this guy's really interested in me. But what I'm doing is I'm getting to know your personality, and then I'm going to flip it and reflect it back to you, but in a male form. All right. And so all I'm doing is I'm reflecting back you, your authentic self, but in a male form. And you'll think you found your soulmate.
So basically, you're being a chameleon.
Worse than that, because when I'm reflecting you back to yourself, because there's nothing genuine about me.
Yeah.
I'm mirroring back. There's the narcissistic, except with the mirror, who your authentic self to you, but in a male form. So you think, at last I found a guy that understands me, that's interested. You think you found your soulmate. As soon as I know you've bought that, you've been hooked, now I'm going to stick my fangs in your neck like a vampire. I'm going to suck everything out of you. And you're going to try and come up with every excuse you can, because that's the nearest thing you found to the guy that you thought was right for you. So you don't want to let that go. So you'll put up with all kinds of crap until the penny finally drops. So this is the way narcissistic personality disorder works.
Which is why every situation is always an empath and a narcissist.
Absolutely. Narcissists get on with each other, but there's got to be a deal there. What the whole thing about narcissists is they're kind of like pack animals. It's like the law of the jungle. That's where you get the hierarchical pyramid from. And you put the psychopaths in there. You've got the bloodline thing in there, because they're willing to breed. Some of the families, I won't mention any names now, insist that you marry your cousin.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, to keep the bloodline.
Some of these so-called elite families, and they're preserving what, in truth, is a mental health disorder.
Yeah.
You know, and they're keeping that going. And then you've got, imagine 100 people, and you get, I'll go fast, long time, speculate now, the so-called Anunnaki, those that heaven came to earth, and they genetically modified the psychopathy. So if you have 100 people and say like 1 or 2 psychopaths in there, 1 or 2%, if you like, then those psychopaths will create enough trauma to create the narcissists that then become the foot soldiers for those psychopaths. And those 100 people, they'll never be able to follow that right-hand path and realize their potential as humanity, because they will always be held back. They can come up with all the solutions they like, and we've got all the solutions. Our problem has always been the same. Somebody puts an obstacle into us realizing those solutions, to connecting with those solutions, because they've got a vested interest. They will lose control. And that's what you get with psychopathy, and that's what you get with narcissistic personality disorder. That's what we've been dealing with all the time. So if you look in terms of the difference between law and legal, law is based on heart-centered empathy, right? That's it. Legal has there's nothing there.
It's dead.
That's why they have to write everything down. They go to the written word. That's why you go to the legal thing. You go to any solicitors, and they'll tell you what they're soliciting. They're prostitutes. You know, it's all. Oh, that's the other thing about Magna Carta that they leave out, is all trials must be cost free.
Yeah.
All right, so they're all cost free. So under Magna Carta, all trials is cost free. If you want to bring a charge, it's cost free. If you're defending yourself from an accusation, that's cost free as well. And then people are going to say, well, how are you going to pay for that then? You know, how can you
Yeah.
like that? I say, well, the same way as they pay for all these legal trials.
Yes.
Check out your birth bonds.
Yes.
Because the legal trials we have these days, they're based. That's why they want your name, your address, and your date of birth, because they want to access that account
And your national insurance number.
and your national insurance number and all that stuff, because then they can draw money from that. So we could still have it under law, the same system. There's no reason at all other than upsetting the malignant parasites, if you want to, MPs.
Yes. Yeah, that's a very good. Yeah.
Okay, and they are all illegal, which, you know, that's a foreign prince or principality. That's got nothing to do with the country at all, and it certainly had nothing to do with the country previous to that. And this is where I'll go back to the clues. So I've probably given enough away now for people to join enough dots to answer their own
So
questions.
Can I ask you a few questions? Because, and let me see how this ties into your knowledge and your research. I often speak about the fact that in the olden days, and I say in the olden days, you know, back in, 100 years ago, we used to have, it was a great honour for families to let their sons join the army and fight for their country. So they needed soldiers. And as people started to, this is all in my opinion from my core, as people started to realise that actually joining the army is not a good thing, and nobody wants to actually send their kids to die for the sake of a country which isn't worth fighting for, because again, it's psychopaths running it. I believe what they've done is they've realised that they don't need to send people off to become soldiers. They can now create corporate soldiers, what I call people that children get sent to school and they learn how to be good corporate citizens. And so now we have corporate soldiers who spend their whole lives training to uphold the corporation, the dead entity, which feeds these, psychopaths.
Malignant parasites.
Absolutely. And because what we have now is, a huge existence of corporations. Everything has been taken over by these dead entities that have no feelings, that everything's written down exactly. My belief is that to help build these corporate soldiers, is it possible, and I believe it is, and I've actually looked at some studies, especially with the National Institute, the NIH, where they've genetically interrupted the gene process, and by way of injecting us, as they have been as childhood, we've had all these childhood vaccines and stuff, so that they kill or suppress our empathy gene from day dot, thus increasing, for instance, we've got a huge increase in autism, and autistic kids struggle to feel. A lot of autistic kids, they're very, very highly intelligent, but they struggle to express emotions. They struggle to read emotions. They can't even read your facial expressions. So have they found another way, I so believe this to be true, to interfere with our empathy by suppressing it so that they can keep creating these good corporate soldiers from birth?
Right, well, the answer to that question is incredibly simple. All right. If we go back to the root and we go back to the olden days, as you say, all of the wars have been fought between those that are in the spectrum, those without empathy, narcissists, against empaths. Now, just because a group of narcissists and empaths put on the same uniform, right, and we're being set up to fight against each other, that's all about division. That's divide and rule. But if we go back to the olden days, as I said before, you had the druids and the warriors, and the bards. Well, the warrior wasn't there to fight. Most of his time was spent looking after the sick, looking after the children, sorting stuff out. All of that stuff was part of a warrior. It was very rare that they would have to go and fight, because to take another life was wrong. It was against the law. And it was against the law in what we call Mosaic law. That's the law of Moses. And this is where, again, it's forensically provable truth. In about 1400 BC, we had the first migration into this country of the 12 lost tribes of Israel. Okay, so that needs to sink in. And they came here under, I believe it might have been a woman called Albane or something like that. And that was the ones that were guided by Moses. They were coming out of Egypt. And we know this because they left a trace of their journey. They left a trace of their journey written in an alphabet, which is called today Colbraean. It looks a bit like a runic futhark. In other words, all the letters are made up of more or less straight lines, so you could carve them with a knife on a bit of wood. It's mentioned in the Bible, you know, the staves that they turned, all of that stuff. So that's the alphabet, and it's all the way through the so-called Holy Lands, Assyria, Etruria, which is Etruscan, that came there, all the way through Rome, all the way through Europe, and everything, all this, Switzerland, all of this writing is there, but nobody could read it. They would go, what's that about? Nobody could read it. And even this form of this alphabet was alongside the clay tablets that were found in Mesopotamia, Sumeria, with what they believed to be the oldest form of writing, which is cuneiform, which was done on a clay tablet, and the imprints are made with a pen that you can do the different shapes in. You can see those in the British Museum. But alongside those, we've got, hey, this alphabet, this Colbraean alphabet as well. So it's about the same date as that. And nobody was able to officially, according to British history, they couldn't figure it out. And then they had loads of guys that were trying to work out the Egyptian hieroglyphs and all that. All these academics that had got qualifications and all that stuff, parroted what other people had parroted to them and all that kind of thing. And generally from places like what I call the Oxbridge. And if you look at Oxford was founded by Alfred the Great because of the Saxons that invaded were so illiterate, he had to send them to Wales and to Ireland so they could learn to read to write.
Wow.
All right. In fact, people used to come from Egypt to learn. And in fact, Akhenaten, one of Akhenaten's daughters, known as Scotia, that's why after her, she's buried in Ireland. That's why Scotland's called Scotland after her, because some of the Irish emigrated over to, they weren't called Irish, to Scotland, named after her, after Scotia. And these are the little details in history that come up, these anomalies that I find really interesting, you know. But, and yeah, they found this writing, this alphabet, in Sicily as well, because they stopped over there, you know. So you've got this writing that no one can translate, no one knows, until, of course, you end up looking back at probably the most suppressed history you're going to find, which is the history of Wales. Now, the Welsh history, and again, that word is a corrupted word. The term Welsh is a High German word. It means foreigner, stranger, or slave. That's what it translates as. Because the Welsh, or the Cymry, or the Cymrians, and the Cymrians were basically known by the Greeks. The Greeks called them the Cymrians, and that's where the Greeks got their alphabet from. So when we look at the old Athenian rule of democracy, demos, you know, people, sovereignty, right? You've got this group of people moving through them and interacting with them, okay? And then coming to these islands and they called themselves the British. Some people would say that British in Old Hebrew means people of the covenant or men of the covenant, which would tie in with the Mosaic law, the Ten Commandments.
Yeah.
Okay, so you had these people living there on the whole of this island. And that's when you find, archaeologically speaking, instantly, almost overnight, historically speaking, you've got this high culture of metalworking and all this kind of stuff. And of course, over here, you've got everything you need in terms of iron and gold and all the materials you need. So it was a really good place to be. It literally was the land of milk and honey.
Right.
Okay, so what happens is that the Welsh language, if you get the cipher and you translate the Colbraean into the Welsh language, and there was a cipher that was preserved for a long time. The last preservation was a guy by Iolo Morgan, and he was a bard, a Welsh bard, and they used to say Colbraean was the bard's language. Basically, it translates into Wales. So the Welsh language is the oldest language, and if you've got the cipher, suddenly all those writings, including the ones in Sicily and all over in Sweden and everything, you can read them.
Makes sense, yeah.
And then you get them from the Welsh, you translate that into English, and now you've got all the king's dynasties, you know, like in the Bible it says son of this, da 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 da. They did all that, they carried on doing all that. Because these are so they weren't lost, they knew where they were, they knew where they're going. But it's just the establishment, those that are probably in the spectrum, all right, they have to suppress that because they don't want you to know that information. And they have the law, for example. I'll give you a bit, you can check it out for yourself, and I've got a bit on my phone. In 37 AD, right, I'll give you the other thing. In 503 BC, there was another migration of the so-called lost tribes, only they got together with the Trojans from Troy under Brutus, and they had many adventures, but they eventually ended up here again. And the reason they came back to Blighty, if you like, was because they're the kin here, and they spoke the same language.
Right.
That's obvious where you would go there, and they were obviously trading and all that. And the only reason they escaped, so you've got the Mosaic lot escaping slavery from Egypt. Then the second lot were escaping slavery from the Assyrians, from Sargon and all that kind of stuff. And it was only because the two sons murdered their dad that created enough of a civil uprising for the 12 lost tribes and the Trojans to get together and get out of there and come here. And they built, thousands of ships that carried loads of people. These aren't poor people. These have got, if you look at in the runic script, the first, it's called a futhark after the Fehu. We have alphabet A, B, Fehu, that means mobile wealth. In other words, what you can carry. You're worth what you can carry. That's your mobile wealth, which is 3-4 dimensional stuff. You can measure the length, breadth, width and weight of something. Yeah. Therefore, it's a fact. And this is the money, this is the gold, that's the real stuff. You can measure the length, breadth, width and weight of it. And if it's a fact, anything that's a fact, it exists in 4-dimensional, which is linear time. So money is weighted metal that you can measure the length, breadth, width and weight of. That makes it a fact, and it exists in linear time. So I'm just going to slightly go off course here. Yeah. So can you measure the length, breadth, width and weight of a promise?
No.
Can you measure the length, breadth, width and weight of a digital currency? That's 2-dimensional. It's only on the screen. Yeah. Right? So is that called evolution?
No.
All right. So anyway, getting back on point with the...
It's called magic. Scamming.
Right. So now you've got Brutus coming over here. And they're established there. Then the next story we've got is the story of SU, which is the new, people say Yeshua and all that stuff. It's SU in Welsh. It's pronounced as SU. After the crucifixion, he allegedly came over here, but most definitely, without a shadow of a doubt, Joseph of Arimathea came over here. And he came over with 12 disciples. and he met a Welsh king, which is a British king, because they weren't called Welsh then, called King Gwerth. And Gwerth in English means George. And this King Gwerth, or George, became Saint George when he met Joseph of Arimathea, because he gave Joseph of Arimathea and 12 disciples one hide of land each. A hide of land is 160 acres. So King Gwerth actually gave the Joseph of Arimathea and the 12 disciples, early Christians, exactly the same as they give to the Druids. And that form of Christianity was completely in harmony with the Druids. The whole thing. You have to remember that SU was an Essene, a Gnostic.
Right.
You know, that's the bottom line. And the oldest form of Christianity is the Church of the British, which predates the Roman Church by 560 years.
Okay.
Absolutely provable. Okay. Now, when William the Conqueror came over 1,000 years later and he was getting his Doomsday Book together, he comes across these 12 hides of land that have never paid any tax. So that's in the Doomsday Book. And there's another bit, I've got it on my phone, I have to open it up, but it's a letter written by Queen Elizabeth I, okay, where she refers to this. So she actually knew this, being the Queen, and obviously we've got the Tudors. Well, that's the Welsh lineage, Tudrig. Henry VII was a Tudrig. He's Welsh, and that was his claim to the throne, and they didn't like that, because actually you've got a proper lineage, and not French lineage so much. I'll just get it out here, because the letter that she wrote to the Roman Church proves without a doubt that this is a fact, because she is referring to it. So the proof is in the Doomsday Book, and the proof of it is in this letter that Queen Elizabeth I is writing to the bishops, the Roman Church bishops, because remember by then her dad had taken over the and here it is here. I've got it here, and this is in 1559. Queen's reply to an address from 5 Catholic bishops. Sirs, as to your entreaty for us to listen to you, we waive it. Okay. Yet do return you this our answer. Our realm and subjects have been long wanderers, walking astray whilst they were under the I get a bit choked about it, were under the tuition of Romish pastors who advised them to own a wolf for their head in lieu of a careful shepherd, whose inventions, heresies and schisms be so numerous that the flock of Christ have fed on poisonous shrubs for want of wholesome pastures. I mean, she's really writing this stuff down. And whereas you hit us and our subjects in the teeth, that the Romish Church first planted the Catholic faith within our realm, our records and chronicles of our realms testify the contrary, and your own Romish idolatry maketh you liars. Witness the ancient monument of Gildas, unto which both foreign and domestic have gone in pilgrimage, there to offer. This author testifieth Joseph of Arimathea to be the first preacher of the word of God within our realm. So there's it goes on a bit more there, but that's Queen Elizabeth I referring to Joseph of Arimathea coming here. And if you want to know what happened, Joseph of Arimathea gave King Gwerth his new banner, which was a red cross with a white background, what you would call the flag of England. But the Angles and the Saxons hadn't even invaded then. So it's the church, that's the flag of the British, or those the men and people of the covenant, which were now coming under, instead of the 10 Commandments, these tribes, because they recognized the Messiah. Unlike the Sadducees and the Pharisees and the Romans, they couldn't recognize it. I mean, you look at the Sadducees, they got a nice little number going there. They're doing the money change a bit in the temples. If you want to be good with God, then you've got to exchange that lovely big lump of gold for one of these little small coins. Otherwise, it ain't going to count. In other words, they got a nice little number going on there. And the last thing they want is some Messiah coming in that's been prophesied that's going to upset their business. So they want to get him out of there. So basically, 37 AD, Joseph of Arimathea comes over, gets 12 hides of land, and gives this banner to King Guelph, and they're coming home. They're coming home, and for 560 years, or until St. Austin came over and started saying, no, this Roman version of Christianity is the true version, and if you don't believe it, we'll kill you.
Oh, right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And let's go fast forward again to 1215. In 1209, that's when the Roman Church did its war against what they call the Cathars in the Languedoc region of France. And they murdered, put to the sword, 20,000 men, women and children in one day in the city of Béziers. And this is where you get this quote from, when that they said, bring the Cathars out, and the city father said, no, we're not going to bring them out, they're good people, because they called themselves the good men and women of Christ. Which means they committed two heresies. Firstly, they allowed women to be priests, that's a heresy, and that they were following the old church, the Church of the British. Where did the Church of the British come? Well, when the second King Arthur invaded and took over Gaul, Christianity came with him, and it came, the first King Arthur, that's when Christianity spread all the way to Rome. And it was Emperor Constantine the Great, his mother brought back the cross that Christ was nailed up on back to this country. It's also, we've got the Ark of the Covenant in this country because they came with the first crew that came over in 1400 BC. You can check all this stuff out for yourself, guys, if you go to, as a YouTube channel, but it's called Britain's Hidden History.
Oh, right, yes, yeah.
All right, there's loads of videos there. And the two main scholars that have been working this history out, because they translated the writings in this Colbrand alphabet into Welsh and then Welsh into English, so they could find all the dynasties and all the kings. For example, the bloodline of Esau had to do with Antony and Cleopatra, and was also linked in with David and Solomon. So in this one guy was the most powerful bloodline of elite, and he turned his back on the whole thing and said, no, it's about love and it's peace and it's about being heart-centered and it's the Gnostic gig, and that's
So where have we, so sort of coming back to now, more of us, I believe, have lost a lot more people have lost their empathy. So how does that...
Well, this is, like I said, all the wars are the same. They're between psychopaths, well, between narcissists and empaths, always. And it doesn't matter whether you've got a different uniform on. That's the illusion they're trying to create. You see, to be a constable, you've got to be heart-centered. You're standing in law.
Yeah, but they're not.
Because they're policy enforcement officers, all right, and they're acting under the forings of the Temple Bar. Okay, so let's look at these. Law is heart-centered. Legal, everything's written down, isn't. That's narcissistic personality disorder.
I mean, I've spoken to, so I often have conversations with many sort of different people, as you know, and one gentleman that I was talking to, is actually sort of ties into what you said. Law, he tells me, the law does not exist outside of you because you are the law.
Yeah.
And
well, the law is, and it's written down, and we've got Sir Edward Cook, whose surname is pronounced Coke, sorry, it was written as Coke, says the law is, and it's in the Coronation Oaths, the customs and traditions of the peoples of this land. That is the law.
But we've lost.
I'll just give you an example, right? Now, when back in the 80s, right, that's going to age me, there was a thing called the Stonehenge Pop Festival.
Right.
All right. And that had been going, and it was coming up to its 12th year.
Yeah.
And if it had been allowed to go in its 12th year, then that would have been established as a custom and a tradition, and the what do they call it? The National Trust wouldn't have been able to take that site over, because the people who were sovereign had got a festival together there, and in the 12th year, after 12 years, magic number again, that then becomes established. And Margaret Thatcher couldn't allow that to happen. They couldn't allow any of that to happen. So they went in there with their policy enforcement officers, using gratuitous violence, and smashed people's mobiles homes up, separated their children from their parents, and the parents from each other. And it all went through the legal system. Jeez. Okay. And that was it. That was the end of the Stonehenge Pop Festival. And the proof is, why did they do it in that time? They knew they had to do it because that was the law. If they'd have allowed that festival to go on for one more year, that would have been the 12th year, and they wouldn't have been able to lawfully do anything about it. And at the time of Margaret Thatcher, we still had courts with juries. We still had that law, even though what she did was completely unlawful, and what the police did was completely unlawful, because what the police do now is they break the law to enforce illegal.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
And this is what people need to realise, because legal is cha-ching. That's where they get their money from.
Legal is for the courts.
Right, but they can only be constables under their oath, because again, it's like the monarch. He's sworn an oath as a service commitment. And perjury is a very serious offence.
The problem we've got is...
If I can just finish, because law is a much, much higher jurisdiction than legal. And we've basically got two systems, even though they want to complicate it with it.
Yeah.
You've got law, and then you've got what's called corpus juris, which is legal, which is Roman. That goes back to the Justinian deception and the written word deception. And this is where you get, like, when they translate the Bible, if you look at the Lord's Prayer, it starts off with God, or it's Almighty God. And that's in the translation from Aramaic, it doesn't use the term God, because God, what's inferred in the 1302 Unum Sanctum by the Pope, 1302, right? 1215 last, and look what they've done with the Magna Carta. They've used statutes which are inferior to annul law. That's treason. There's no doubt about it. That is treason to do that.
Wow.
So when you get someone like Tony Blair starts changing the laws on treason, he's using statute to undo the law. That's treason in and of itself. Ipso facto, according to the Great Charter. There's no... And so what they've done with the Magna Carta is they've used statutes. So you've got, like, say, 61 articles in Magna Carta. How many do you think are left after they've put their statute up? How many articles do you think they got left there? Take a guess.
No.
Out of 61.
Not many.
3.
Really?
That's what they've done, is they've taken it down. So what they've done, and this is where we get into the Shakespearean bit, which is where the pennies really start to drop for me, is because firstly, I could find, and I'm not the only one, so I'm not the only one sticking my head out here, no evidence at all in any way, shape or form that a guy called William Shakespeare ever existed.
No.
There's none whatsoever. The nearest thing we can get, if you go down to the office of Q, and I've got some mates that have done that, and they've written books about it, so I take the source, is a guy called William Shakespeare.
Okay.
William Shakespeare was a money lender from Stratford-on-Avon. Okay, And he did very well for himself. And he was also an actor, and he was an actor and travelled around with Chamberlain's men. And one of the reasons they needed a fall guy, because the real guys, I believe, after researching it, people like Edward de Vere, Francis Bacon, who was also the main editor of the King James Bible, which is where you get Lord God written in capital letters, and those your viewers that know about Capitis Maximus Dominius. In other words, anything that's written to you in capital letters is not you.
It's not you, it's a corporation, it's a fiction.
It's exactly right. So you've got it there.
Yeah.
So that's not God then, is it?
No.
If it's Lord God, and anything you put in front of something diminishes it, as in the colour of law. It's the colour of law. So you're not man or mankind or Homo sapien meaning man thinking man. You become a human. What's hue? It's colour, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's colour. So you become the colour of man, which is inferior, which puts you into the legal jurisdiction. Wherever you see massive deceit and deception and stuff isn't clear to your heart, that's evidence of deception, isn't it? You know?
Well, when I read the Bible, I feel there's a lot of deception there.
Well, it's in the translation.
Yes, absolutely.
It's what's it been translated from? It's been, and who's it been translated by?
Yeah.
You know, just think of what Elizabeth I was saying in 1559. What her opinion was on those that had translated.
Yes.
Those are the translations, and that's before the King James Bible.
But you were saying about Shakespeare.
Right, Shakespeare. These guys, all right, the Forens of the Temple Bar, and men like William Marshall, they know what honour is. They know what the law is. Okay, so in order for them to do stuff in an inferior jurisdiction, they've got to get you to consent to give up your authentic self and to be something else, whatever it is that you want to be. But as long as you give up your soul or your authentic self, that gets you in there. And in their terms, whoever gives up their authentic self is basically walking dead.
Absolutely.
They've got no soul. How can you be alive if you've got no soul?
Yep.
Okay, so there's the corpus bit on it. And if you go to Unum Sanctum, 1302 Unum Sanctum, that's where the first testamentary trust was. That word testamentary has to do, going all the way back to those so-called 12 lost tribes, to give testament meant that you lost your ability to procreate if you bore false witness or committed perjury. You lost your testes.
Yeah.
That was the end of your line. So they were very serious about that. And if you happen to be in the spectrum, that was to check that. So you didn't have that interbreeding thing where that mental health disorder kept multiplying itself. And the more that multiplies itself, then that creates more narcissists.
Yeah, yeah.
And so basically, this is the real pandemic.
The pandemic of psychopaths and narcissists.
Exactly. And what we're dealing with is the symptoms of that pandemic. The whole COVID thing, all that gaslighting thing, all that corporation stuff, all that legislation stuff, that's a symptom of that quality of consciousness, of that mental health disorder. Because if you're in a relationship with a narcissist, they're going to gaslight you, aren't they?
Oh, yeah.
But they're just doing this on a, in their term, global scale. Let's look at that word global. Glow means light, as in light bringer. And Baal, B-A-A-L, is one of the pantheons of the fallen angels. And this is what I believe the fallen angels are. Is those that have lost their authentic self. They have fallen. So those that are in that.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter whether you're even of this as a species. You could be Anunnaki. But if you've lost that capacity to empathize, which of course they would have, because they did all the genetic modification.
Yep.
Because what this mental health disorder obsesses about is to create inferior, subordinate versions of itself. So it builds a pyramid from the top down. So it's creating. So anything that can destroy empathy, whether it be, as you intonated before, in a vaccine. And I know people that worked really good spiritual programs, and they had that one jab and that wrecked it. And it's taken them a long time to get back to that. It destroyed their capacity to empathize in their spiritual program. You know, so that, like I say, the attack has always been this mental empathy, our to destroy who we really are.
So I'm just going to throw a few things out, just a few questions. First of all, what are the barons? What role? People say you need to do your Article 61, send it to the barons. For some reason, this has always not felt right to me, because for me, and I've never done this, I've always thought, well, why do I need to write to a baron to get my freedom? So what, am I wrong? What are the barons? What role do they play for us?
Well, this is the big problem. I went through a lot of this with John, because we believed a lot of the deceptions that were around Magna Carta, that it didn't count, that you were basically, I mean, here's an example of the contradiction in terms, that it was composed by the barons, and baron is French for free man, and that you're a serf, and therefore it doesn't apply to you. But then at the same time, the Magna Carta says you have to be tried by your peers. Whether you're lowly down, a serf, or whether you're a baron. The whole thing about the Magna Carta, the Great Charter, is that's a form of law. And I'll go back to the history again. As I said, in 503 BC, we had the Trojans coming over with Brutus. And we had we've got this nonsense about the Roman invasion. They got chucked out. Caesar was chucked out twice, you know, with his tail between his leg, you know, and he had to lie. And then the kings of this country took over the whole of Europe and Rome, you know. So this and when the archaeologists come over here and they say, oh, we found a Roman villa. It's not a Roman villa. As soon as they see that it's not typically Roman, they stop the excavation because it goes against the agenda. And the agenda is the first church, the authority of the church, i.e. the Vatican, which they've usurped. That's a fraud. That's a fraudulent claim, and it only stands because they put people to death at the sword. In other words, they went against the teachings of Yesu. Absolutely, without a shred of the doubt. There's so much evidence about that. The second one is when it comes to law. So if you're going to invade this realm, you need to take out the religion, and you need to take out law, but you need to replace it with something else. So you replace it with an inferior thing that you can control and manipulate when it suits you, i.e. that narcissistic personality. It'll adjust to whatever it was. So you could get rid of your narcissist, you know, and then you find your mates dating him and they're behaving completely different. Because that's all they are. They're a process. And this is why I'm personally so against we've got Trump. Trump is a Trojan horse. He's just invented 500 billion into what? Artificial intelligence. But that's what narcissistic personality disorder is.
Some people will argue with you and they'll say, no, Trump needs to do that because what he's actually doing, he's exposing and putting it to
But what were you like when you were in a relationship with a narcissist? You were trying to give them the benefit of the doubt.
Absolutely.
Oh, he loves me really. He's like, he had to do this and all the others because you're codependent.
But the thing is, I mean, I kind of explained it in a video, I think yesterday, that, you know, Trump is a businessman and he's there to run the business, or that is the United States of America.
How many working class blokes are there in government?
None.
Right. How many barristers, those that have been called to the bar, and get this with America, we're talking about America now. I mean, artificial intelligence is a psychopath. Is a narcissist. Now, I, as a man, I don't want to have anything to do with artificial intelligence. I can think for myself and work things out, and I'll learn if I make mistakes. I've learned more from making mistakes than I have from getting things right. including relationships with narcissistic women.
Yeah.
They've given me the best knowledge I could have possibly had. They were the best teachers. Once you sort it all out, otherwise you can't see this. So what you've got in America, you've got, we won the War of Independence and we've got our Constitution. No, I mean, you've done so many amendments, and what form of law are you running at it? It's the franchised Bar Association.
Yes.
The American version of the Bar Association, the British Accredited Registry.
Yeah.
All right, that's what they're running over there. And why have you got a gold fringe around the flag? That's British Admiralty law. So where's your Constitution? It's got buried underneath the same stuff that our law's buried under, that our Constitution is buried under. It's buried under these piles and piles of deception or detritus that comes out of the mouths of these people with the mental health disorders.
So the Constitution is below the Great Charter.
No, the Constitution is the Great Charter.
Right.
The Constitution, actually, all the Great Charter is the writing down of the Constitution. The Constitution is you as a woman. That's your natural law. You know the difference between right and wrong. Your experience in life to make you a member of the jury is being a mother. I mean, like, I'll give you an example of this as your education. I got two children, and my daughter's the eldest, and they'll be looking after them. My daughter would come and her brother, guys, and Guy hit me, and it's like, I'd know, like, I'm supposed to fall for this and go and have a go at my son. But what had happened is my son was quite happily playing by himself with the soldiers in a world of his own. He was quite happy. She was bored and wanted him to play with her. And he said, no, I want to do this. So she then messed up his game. Yep. So he thumped her.
Yep.
Okay, so let's look at that as a process. What we have now is we have certain countries claiming that they've received attacks for no reason at all. They've done absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
Okay, they've done absolutely nothing. Okay, well, as parents, we kind of know this one, and we've got to make with the jury in the family, aren't we? The family's the jury. So I have to sit down and go, really? What did you do? Did you do anything to upset your brother? And then the ears begin to go red a bit then. And then the lad comes in, she did it like this, and this is the whole thing. And then, there's a process there. That's you learning to be a juror. The Constitution is the Constitution of, for want of a better term, what mankind or womankind because if you look at the term God, which in unum sanctum means grantor of dominion.
That's right.
All right, that's the grantor of the dominion. That's the architect. Well, the architect isn't the supreme creator. All an architect does is rearrange what's already been created.
Yeah.
That's what the supreme architect does. Just because you can chip away at a bit of stone doesn't mean you can create that stone.
Yeah.
And even if you call it concrete and you cast it and you put metal bits inside it, all those materials existed beforehand.
So the Constitution is basically
who we really are.
A creation of who we are.
Tribally. Think what would happen in a tribe. In a tribe, you've got all the mothers, all the fathers in there, and they're the elders, and they're getting on a bit, and they decide who's going to be the chief. And whoever's the chief is the one that's in lumbered. They decide who's going to be the warriors. The warriors, their job is to look after the family.
See, this is making more sense to me now. So basically the Constitution is what we have created.
Who we really are.
And so
it's a written down version of who we really are and how we used to do things.
So when you look at every business, or should we say every corporation, has they have to have a written constitution. So even the corps, have a constitution that they abide by, a set of ethos, a set of rules that they have to.
But it has to be written down.
It has to be written down, yeah.
Why? Well, let's just go back to, they still call them now, don't they? They still call them hearings.
Oh, yes.
They're not called writings, even though they go in with huge suitcases. I mean, I've been to hearings where people are coming with wheelie bins of paperwork. Yeah. It's all the stuff's written down there. That's legal. That's that jurisdiction. In law, Nothing was written down because it's a hearing.
Yeah.
Because you're sovereign and the jury is sovereign.
And they need to hear you.
And they need
to.
to.
And would it be as well that they need to hear you because back in the day people were illiterate, so the only form of
Exactly. So it doesn't mean to say they're stupid in the same way, like the Beatles. They can't read or write. That doesn't make them any worse songwriters.
Absolutely.
And just because somebody can actually listen to what they say and then write it down, that just means they're a scribe. And the important thing is they're writing it down accurately.
Yeah. So again, we don't need to invoke Article 61 to any barons because
that's because what they've done is they've turned the Article 61 into a statute,
right?
To put it in that jurisdiction. We've got two signposts. One is the right-hand journey, which is law, which is our constitution. All right, and if we'd followed that, absolutely, we would not be in the situation we are now.
Yep.
Right, but what they've done is that pathway is all now overgrown. That signpost.
Yep.
What they've done is they've made a 3-lane motorway on the left-hand path, and they said this is the only way to go.
The smart way to go.
This is 3-lane motorway.
Yeah.
You know, we'll aid and abet you in doing all this. This is all there is, and actually, Parliament is sovereign.
Yep.
You're nothing, and this is what happened with the Shakespearean thing. You consent to be that you're not. So if I say, yay means yes and nay means no, you've consented to be a nay-me, something that's not me. A fiction. So basically, if we go look at the parallel process of a play, and I say, well, I want you to be an actor. So I don't want you to be who you really are. I need you to act this role. And here's the role I'm giving you.
Here's the role that Trump's playing. Yeah.
All right. Or you're just an extra. You're just an extra in this scene. And your surname is your surety name.
Yeah.
You're paying for the whole performance.
Yeah.
And you've consented to pay for the whole performance.
So
basically, from being a sovereign, you've now just become a walk-on extra, and you're looking in terms of authority to whoever is directing the performance. And all you've got to do is what you're told in terms of the role and be an actor, as long as you're a namee and a surety namee. And when you go to school, that's what you're told you are. You're your name and your surname and your date of birth.
Yep.
That's what they all want to know, because that's the account. I mean, people say to me, they go, oh, these banks and all the other stuff, they just invent money out of thin air. No, they don't. Bankers don't do that. They sit down and work it out. They go, 8 billion people, or fast falling, maybe 7 billion now, according to whatever, divided by the total mass on this worldwide, comes down that if we all live together in the same population density as Paris, we'd take up the size of probably half of Texas. So there's plenty to go round. So what they've done is they've got us all living together in these confined spaces.
Yeah.
But what they do is they lend their currency, their fiat currency, into existence at interest. So if they were to divide properly what your share is, and your entitlement to that is that you exist, like I exist, and you can measure the length, breadth, and unfortunately the weight as well of me, and I exist in linear time, then I have a right to an estate. And that estate may be in this country worth, I don't know, well, what did they say in Joseph of Arimathea? 160 acres.
Yeah.
That's what they gave the disciples. So if we say that's 160 acres, that's more than enough for me and a family to do. But what they've done is they've done the math, and they've gone, okay, let's monetize that estate, but we won't let you have direct access to that estate because you've consented to be dead.
Yes, absolutely.
And we now have power of attorney over that estate.
Yeah.
And as time goes by, because you're using our currency at interest, your estate's getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And eventually you get to the state now where they're thinking, oh, we're going to have to take some of these people out. Because when people are born again, they inherit that. They come in here because the Creator the ultimate creator, if you want to put it. I in my prayers I say, Great Spirit of the universe, infinite love, the original creator, the source of everything, and all that is true.
I like that.
All right, that's what I say. Not an architect that's come along and rearranged the furniture a bit and is claiming to be God, or has that mental health disorder where, what do they do? And I say, I'm God. It's all about me. It's a mental health disorder. And that's what a lot of the royal family say. Oh, it's divine rule. Because I'm God, I'm the granter of dominion. I grant you. Well, you had to steal it in the first place.
Yes, yeah.
And if you go back to that early form of Christianity and the so-called King Arthur's Round Table with a jury of knights that were in honour, exercising their empathy, that held the kingdoms together, there's the law, there's the root of it. That goes all the way back to tribal law, the 12 tribes. Why were they called lost? Because they didn't want to go along with the Sadducees and the Pharisees. And so the Sadducees and the Pharisees, or those that are in the spectrum, said, oh, we've lost them. Like that narcissist when you shut the door in his face and go no contact. Well, then you're lost to them, aren't you? And that's the only way you can deal with someone that's in the spectrum, with that mental health disorder, is no contact. The fact that they're always trying to contract with you all the time, you know, because they're not, this is how you set mankind up or womankind up against each other. They get a job, a Job. Job in the Bible was someone that was tormented by lesser fallen gods.
Yep.
Why would a loving God do that to one of his creation? The term Elohim is not singular, it's plural.
Yep, yep.
You know, so these are the translations, these are the kind of stuff here. What we're dealing with is fallen angels, and my definition of a fallen angel is those without empathy. They're in the spectrum. Doesn't matter what species they are in the universe. If they don't have empathy, if they've lost their authentic self, then they're fallen.
So if more and more people have been obviously lost their or suppressed their empathy gene or interfered with the empathy gene through the process of vaccination, and you know we've got education, indoctrination, all of it. What chances do we really have in a trial by jury?
Okay, well, let's look at it this way. You started this interview off by making reference to the date and that the planets were in alignment. The time we are now is known as the apocalypse.
Yes.
And the apocalypse, although it sounds quite dramatic, means the removal of the veil. It's to remove the veil so you can see what has been hidden.
Yeah.
That's where we're at now. So the solution is to remove the veil so people know. In law, it's about establishing your standing.
Yeah.
And once you know what your standing is, and that you're standing in that is true, you are immovable. You can't be moved. Why would you want to step outside of the truth? There's no future in it. That's the whole deal. Yeah. Why would you give up that is true for a pack of lies? You know, all right, you can be deceived, and we all have been deceived. Yeah. This whole thing, you know, we are deceived, but ultimately, you know, we can connect with if we can connect with our hearts, we can connect with that is true, and that's it.
And that's how you know thyself.
Yeah, to thine own self be true. That's all you have to do. It's you know, the great spirit of the universe, infinite love, the creator and source of, you know, of all, the source of everything and all that is true, made things very simple. Law is really, really, really simple. You just have that 12 juries, it's fully floating to whatever the situation is. It will deal with the financial stuff. I mean, let's just go there for a little bit. Imagine a jury court, and some guy comes in and says, oh, I've got a bunch of bailiffs around, and they want to come and take my home, you know, or my grand's home or something like that. And so they go, okay, well, let me see if we'll prove the claim. You bailiffs, can you show the authority what you've got there? You need a warrant under law that a judge has actually signed that. And I'll forewarn you, if you don't have that, then you've committed treason. In law, you've committed treason, right? That's a hangable offence. I'll give you an example, because it was Alfred the Great got this together, and he chopped the heads off of 70 judges because they were corrupt. Sounds a bit extreme, doesn't it?
No, it sounds pleasurable.
But that's the law. Treason is a hangable offence. It's a capital offence.
So I hope all the bailiffs are watching this live right now.
All right, so, well, no, I'm just telling you what my research is doing. You know, I mean, that's all I can do. Take it or leave it. I'm just a bard. And that's what a bard does, is that's why I'm not supposed to go and fight in a war. That's why the warriors will give me a good slapping if I end up. I'm there at the front, but I carry the law and remind them what they're doing and all that sort of stuff, and sing a few songs and make them happy in weddings, funerals, bar mitzvahs, whatever you want to talk it about. Yeah, I've done all that, you know. That's the gig of a bard, you know. And I do a bit of the warrior bit, actually looking after people, because that's the main gig for a warrior, is to look after the family, to look after the tribe, to make sure everything's all right. And if you see something's wrong, then you do something about it. You don't get a committee together and decide how much that's going to. You just, if something needs doing, you do it. You know, that's being a warrior. That's not, you know. And if you need a hand to do it, you go and see one of your warrior mates and go, like, oh yeah, mate, well, I better get on with that then. You know, it's self-adjusting, fully floating, all-inclusive. There's a word that the Native Americans had. It's called koyana. It means a way of living that demands another way of living. Well, that left-hand sign that goes to legal and all that stuff, that 3-lane motorway, that's a way of living that demands another way of living. The way of living that we need is that right hand, that path that's overgrown now, that's very seldom tread, that has signs there, you beware, trespassers will be prosecuted. They don't want you going there. They don't want you inheriting your birthright. You know, that's, you know.
And they've masked, they've corrupted the Magna Carta or the Great Charter.
Well, they've used statutes. Yeah, they go, oh, it's nothing there, you don't have any right now. It was just meant for the barrel. Anything, they'll say anything to get you away from it. And they're using your head. That's why the way out of this is to simply use your heart. Use your heart, use your gut, your heart and your head. Those need to be in perfect alignment. Let your heart leave. You know when you listen to, you know, I look at some of the politicians, I'll try not to mention any names, and I just think to myself, I in my heart, I go, this guy's lying his teeth off. Yeah. He's a professional liar. Yeah. You know, he's got a vested interest, you know. I mean, it's insulting. Yeah. You know, now if I'm the king, and I'm a sovereign, and he's my servant, right? He's straight out there. I've got my boy. I said, right, do you want to say that again? And if you say that again, and I decide that's treason, you lose your head. You know, so off you go. Yeah.
Well, they're all playing a role. They're all
they're all actors in a role. They're going, oh, nothing personal. Yeah. Nothing personal. It's only busy sinningness.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, it's you know, this is the research that I've done. I mean, you can, you know, like I say, Alan Wilson and Byron Brackett, they translated a lot of this. Some of it is actually scripture, but these writings to get the king's dynasties, the whole thing, the history, how the tribes went, you know, for better, for worse. For example, the Roman Church, they said that if ever something falls from heaven onto earth, then that upsets their authority. Then that would be a sign from God that they're not supposed to be running things. And you've got to remember that in Unum Sanctum, basically what the Pope Boniface was claiming is that God said, you know what, I'm really bored with my creation. I'm going to make you the trustee, and you can also be the beneficiary as well. I don't know how that works in a trust. But that was unum sanctum, and that came in 1302. So let's look at 1209, the good men and women of Christ in the Cathar Crusades. I forgot to mention that, didn't I, about what it was that it may have been Simon de Montfort, I may be wrong, but he was in charge of 20,000 mercenaries, that the Pope says, do what you like, I forgive you. You can take whatever you want, do what you like, you're doing it for God. And so they said, right, they won't bring the Cathars out of Béziers. And the captain says to Simon de Montfort, or whatever his name was, who was in charge of the whole thing, the general, if you like, but what should we do? Because there's Catholics there, they're all in sanctuary in the church there, they're Christians, you've got Jews, Cathars, Muslims, and you've got Catholics in there in the church there. What should I do? Should we spare them? And the general says, kill them all, God will know his own. And that is quoted, kill them all, God will know his own, is quoted in some elite, so-called elite regiments, certainly American regiments. That's, if you want a better definition of psychopathy, where there is no justice, and even if you're on the side that you're supposed to, even if you're a good Catholic boy or good Catholic girl, you're still going to get 20,000 men, women, and children put to the sword in Béziers in 1209 by the Roman Church. What has that got to do with the teachings of SU?
Yeah.
And they carried on doing that, in their whole Inquisition. And sometimes they let people go, but they mutilated them so those people could say, you better do what the Pope says, otherwise you'll end up like me.
Well, doesn't he declare himself as God on earth?
And then what does someone in the spectrum do?
Yeah, reflection.
So we've got this same, it comes down, it's that simple. It's a certifiable mental health disorder that James Fallon can take a PET scan of your skull, look at your brain, go, yeah, that's one there. Because what happens is, to a regular whole person that is true to themselves, the area of the brain where empathy resides, there's just loads of activity around. I mean, you think about buying a birthday present for your kids, or a mate or something like that. You just think of the thought that you go for. You want to get the right. Oh, that's all empathy. You're putting yourself in their situation. But when it comes to someone who's got that certifiable mental health disorder, all psychopaths are narcissists, but not all narcissists are psychopaths. Psychopaths are born, narcissists are created. There's nothing. There's just this blank area, this black space where there's no activity at all. So you could tomorrow change the whole world. Just get everybody who's in a situation of authority, get them the PET scan. Oh, we got one here, right. You lose your job, mate, and you lose your assets, you lose all that kind of stuff.
Well, if you're in the
because
you've just got a job, mate.
Yeah,
you're in the spectrum.
Yeah. Actually, that's exactly what.
You can but it's not going to happen, is it?
No, that's what
they're not
going to
allow that to happen.
You have to be a narcissist to be in power, because only people with no feelings can do business.
Because you see, in a sense, they're compensating for what they can't have. And this is, you have to look at the trauma they went through. This is why you have instantized trauma. This is why you have these grooming gangs, these paedophile groups, because that sort of paedophilia, that's how you wipe out empathy, that capacity to empathy in a young child. You traumatize them so much, you give them that low self-esteem, and then you can use them. And then they become, it's institutionalized.
We were watching something. What were we watching? Where they even said that's why you have now cartoons where they make the children cry, like Bambi's mum dying, because they need to traumatise the children.
Yeah. It's all about trauma.
Yeah, and so there's even in the little children's TV program films, they cry. Someone dies. There's someone getting hurt. There's a loss. Because it's all about the trauma that they want to cause the children.
People who are traumatized are easily led. They follow orders. Because they've lost the capacity to connect with their heart. Because their heart's been broken. That's what happens to narcissists. Their hearts get broken.
And there's a lot of heartache at the moment. It's really, you know, like they've ruined the family structure. They've weakened the alpha male. They've removed, you know, even now, you know, the fact that they can mess about with genders and what is a woman, what is a man, and you know, they are completely ruining the natural. And
well, that's why they're malignant parasites. There are three expressions of cellular life: natural, benign, and malignant. A natural cell knows the who, what, where, when, how of what it is, and that it's connected to a bigger body. It's connected. It's all about connection. All right. The benign cell, well, kind of knows what it is, but it's disconnected. So it will hang about with like those of its kind, and it will make a mole or a wart or something like that. A malignant cell, well, I'm God. It's all about me.
Yep.
You know, and I want to create inferior, subordinate versions of myself. That's the tumor. And that's what it keeps on doing. You know, and people say to me, well, Al, you know, is there a cure for narcissistic personality disorder? And my answer to that is absolutely, I believe there is. But they have to want to be able to do it. And then the next question is, well, how many narcissists want to cure themselves? I don't know any.
they have to recognise it.
Because, well, that's the whole point. And if you call someone a narcissist, they won't, they can't, like, watch the James Fallon thing. He's a pro-social psychopath. He's a consultant, very high up in his field. He had a whole class of people, and they all gave each other PET scans of their brains. Okay, and then the class came back to him. He was involved as well. The class came back to him, and they went, "We think we found one." And James, "What, really?" And he's looking around the class. Someone here is a psychopath. And he goes, "Let me have a look at the picture." And they look at the picture, and he goes, "Oh my God, you're right. I wonder who that is." Well, of course, he's the head of the department. So although it's all done data protection anonymously, he kind of peels it back, and it's him. And so he then goes back to his missus, and he goes, he's kind of shocked by it, you know, and he goes back to his missus, "Darling, you know, it's been a happy marriage for years. I've done this test and everything, and I did a brain scan with the rest of the class and everything, and it turns out I'm a psychopath." And she goes, "Well, of course you are." And he goes, "Well, what do you mean, of course I am?" He said, "We've been telling you this for years." And he's going, "No, you've been telling me I'm nuts." and she's going, "No," but because they can't hear that.
Yes.
They can hear "I'm nuts," or "you're a bit crazy," or, you know, all that kind of stuff, but they can't hear the clinical definition. You are a narcissist. You have a certifiable mental health disorder. You are a less than package.
Yeah, yeah. And there's so many around at the moment, so many.
And of course, what they do in the narcissist thing, they have to compensate. So they always overcompensate. So instead of them actually going the less than bit, they overcompensate to become the more than bit. It's all about me.
The God complex.
Yeah.
Divine.
Yeah.
It's divine rule.
Yeah.
It's
I'm right, you're wrong. I'm
yeah,
big, you're small.
it's always blame other people.
Yeah.
But they're never going to have the humility. You go, "Oh, I made a mistake. I'm real sorry.
No.
What can I do to make amends?" You know, like you were saying, it's like someone if you bash into someone, "I'm really sorry," you know, like. But all the lawyers are going, "Don't ever admit liability or anything like that."
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, but in law,
Yeah, it's very true. You know, you only have to look at, like you say, when people have accidents and insurance companies are involved, and they go, "Actually, keep your mouth shut, don't admit liability."
exactly.
Because you're not allowed to have empathy in that. Isn't there a thing that in the law dictionary there's no definition for soul? They can't define
No,
in the soul.
no, because in their jurisdiction there is no soul.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, I mean, they look at, again, if you look at blues music or soul music or the Beatles music, it's got loads of soul in it.
Yeah.
It's like emotional. It's like all there, you know. It's They don't write it down. In blues music, it's just 3 chords. It's only 3 chords.
But even now, the music now has no soul.
Well, it's because what you've got now, the music business now, believe me, I was I told you, it basically, you've got a porn star
Yeah, absolutely.
that's miming to a backing track that's created by artificial intelligence.
Yeah,
That's what you've got.
yeah. And they call it music and they sell out.
You know,
And that's it.
or you've got guys that listen to the drum and bass and they it's part of our culture, and it's like, really, you created the computers that made that all those years ago? And it's no, you know, but why do you got the drum and bass? Because that's what comes through the walls more than anything else, and it causes the conflict, and it breaks up the communities. And it's like, no, it's our culture, it's all the other stuff. And so, well, if you want to listen to it that loud, put some headphones on, mate.
See, I can appreciate music, all different types, but when I was young, I grew up with, you know, people like, you know, singers and music players. And one of my idols was, for instance, Barbara Streisand. And people like her that were able to sing and
sing proper, yeah.
you know, and just by her voice, you know, and I mean, I like classical music as well, but just by their voice, they can, you know, touch so many of your emotions.
Well, the idea, speaking as a bard and musician, is if I hit a guitar string, it vibrates the air, and that vibration of the air goes through and it vibrates your eardrum, and your brain goes, here's the noise. The art of being a musician is you have to hang an emotion on that vibration of air that vibrates your ears. So when you hear, your head says, oh, there's a noise there, but your heart said, no, here's the motion as well. Or your gut says, you know, that's it. Or your body starts dancing, going, yep, that's it. You'll just go, yeah.
But this is why I couldn't understand, and I still can't understand, how anyone can enjoy. I don't remember what it's called, but I did go to a club once, and it was like a rock band, but it was one of those where you had to bash into each other, and the music was just awful. Have you ever seen that?
No,
I've never. And I was in this club, and I was thinking, what the hell is going on? And I don't know what this kind of rock music was, but it was just noise, and it was heavy, but you had to literally hit into each other.
No.
I thought, what? Huh?
Mosh pit.
What?
Mosh pit.
Mosh pit, is that what you call it? And I just thought, what is that?
No, I like rock music, but you know,
Yeah, but
I'm
this
that generation. I listen
even...
to AC/DC, you know, all that kind of. And I don't even call that rock music. That's what I call heavy blues.
Right.
It's heavy blues music. That's the root. Speaking as a musician, and there's no.
Yeah, but they still played.
Yeah, but they're really playing. They're playing live, and there's the important bit. There's no artificial flavourings, colouratives, or preservatives in there. There's no miming. What you get, it's there. It's live. It's in the moment. It's tribal, and its root goes all the way back to those tribes. Now, imagine a tribe, and they've got no drummer, and you want to dance. So it's like, oh, you want a drummer, someone who can keep time. You know, when I would teach music, I'd tell guys, get yourself a metronome. And they go, I don't want it. I mean, some of the tracks, it's on the memory stick. I would record a track that would be on a metronome, click, click, click. Then I'd play along with that rhythm guitar track, run that track back again. Then I'd do the bass, and then I'd do the drums, or whatever order I would do it. And it would all sound like it's all being played at the same time.
Yeah.
You know, that's the art of being a musician. I wasn't programming it. I was really playing it in the moment, in the time, in the groove. You know, that's the skill like Paul McCartney does, like any musician worth their salt can do. You know, and you need to be able to be pretty good master at one instrument, and at least a couple of other ones as well.
But isn't music also about listening to your inner heartbeat, to your inner rhythm, because you are creating a rhythm?
Yeah, well, the rhythm or the groove depends on the mood. So you want to create a mood, then you adopt that rhythm or that groove to it, you know, whatever it is, that and it all goes to one. I mean, it's just a reflection of the symphony of life.
Yeah.
You know, we're all part of this symphony of life. We're all, you know, as long as you can be true to yourself, I am, you're the I am, then as long as you're I am, then we are. And that's it. It's as simple as that. But if you can't do the I am, you start being the actor. You've lost that authentic self. You've lost the I am. Then you're just an actor, and you need a director, you need a cast, you need all the other stuff, and it needs to be sold, and that whole...
Well, they've monetized everything. They've jumped on absolutely everything.
Yeah, but they
for
have
profit.
to. They've monetized freedom now. They're going, they've got this huge bubble of this fiat currency that they're taking away people's rights. I mean, like, you've got a ULEZ charge.
Yes, I know. They charge you for the air. I mean,
let's go to that in a jury court.
Yeah.
Right, Mr. Khan, sit down here, please. We've got the jury here. And what's your claim that this individual owes you money? Because in law, a constable has to uphold the right to travel freely. Because if you go back to the most of the Romans, roads weren't built by Romans. They were built by the early British. They existed all around the country, and you had the roads were free spaces. And your right to travel freely without let or hindrance was upheld.
Stated in your
that was
passport.
Absolutely stated, and the constable was there to ensure that your right to travel without let or hindrance. Well, what do they do now? They're the ones that are pulling you over.
Yeah.
Cha-ching, getting the charge. Why? Because you've got a license, and lie as in dishonesty, sense. I'm a liar by my sense. That's
But they teach you the license at school. When you work in a school and you've got 4 or 5-year-olds learning to write, they start off with a pencil, and then they get a license to use a pen. So they have to pass the test with a pencil.
Exactly.
To then get a license.
But when you vote, what do you have to use to vote?
A pencil.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Why?
Because they can rub it off.
No, because you're registered, you applied
As an infant.
an asylum. You were an asylum seeker, and you registered to vote in a ward.
Yep.
In that asylum.
Yep.
And asylums hold 2 kinds of people: debtors and lunatics. And you can't give a lunatic a knife, because a knife was needed to sharpen the pen.
That's crazy, isn't it?
So that's why you when you vote, you prove that you're illiterate because you've signed with an X, and you've done it with a pencil, that you can't be trusted with a knife, and that you're voting for someone else because you've declared yourself to be a mental health outpatient, to make up your mind for you, because you can't think for yourself. So you get these MPs, or malignant parasites, together, and when they have meetings, they don't have meetings, do they? What do they have? They're called
hearings. No, what?
Surgeries.
Oh, really?
Yeah, when MPs get together and they have a meeting, your local MPs, they're called surgeries.
Oh my.
So you've registered in a ward, and you've declared yourself. I mean, a barrister. 2 words. Stare means to stand or to stand for. Barrow means a dunce or an incompetent.
That's
So you hire yourself a barrister, and he's going to represent you, because you can't speak for yourself, because you've declared yourself to be a dunce or an incompetent.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
That's the Latin root of barrister, stare and barrow. Look it up. I'm not making this stuff up.
No, I completely believe you. So they've made us too busy in our lives to want to even question or research any of these things. They've influenced our empathy, and like you say, they've also traumatized us.
They want to break our hearts.
Yeah.
That's what they have to do, is break our hearts.
And a lot of the films you see are all about, violence.
What's the best way to break a heart? War.
Yeah.
And what's the best way to ensure that children become narcissists? Kill their parents. And then they're abandoned, aren't they? There's no one to love. I mean, from the ages of 1 to 7, you're completely dependent on other people.
Yeah.
And if you become institutionalized, so-called looked after in these so-called care homes where you get abused, and therefore you're increased. This is what I mean. It's the real pandemic. The real pandemic are these, it is narcissistic personality disorder. It's a certifiable mental health disorder that can be proved with a PET scan, where individuals that have that disorder should not have any authority over anyone, or literally maybe anything.
Yeah, they're the ones that are needed to run companies because they have that.
Yeah, but the companies are there to profit when in truth you're already the creditor just by being here. And the only reason you've been tricked into being the debtor. Well, that's fraud. The interesting thing about fraud is there's no time limit to try a fraud.
Wow.
In law. So
it is absolutely interesting. So hence the objection of homeschooling continues. Yeah, I mean, I would absolutely advise as many people as possible, if you can, as hard as it is, do homeschool your children. I've always said this, it is very hard work, but you don't even have to be, you know, it's not like you have to sit them down and teach them maths and English and history and whatever. You just do what you can, but at least you're keeping them away.
Well, that used to be possible, but it wasn't fashionable. I mean, when I was a youngster, my dad's salary paid the mortgage, paid for everything. And my mum, she didn't have to go out to work. She could literally be there to homeschool. And she could homeschool with the other mothers in the street.
Yeah.
You know, there was no problem there. And the kids recognised mum and dad and the mates in the street, and they kind of become this tribal thing. That's the community. What's that going to cost? Nothing. Providing the old man can earn enough money to keep it all together like he used to. But,
yeah, it's all gone. So how do you think, so if you had to recommend a way for people to start using their rights that are natural to us?
Well, it's not for me to suggest anything, you know, really. People need to make their own minds up, you see, because the most important thing is free will and choice.
Yeah.
You know, so people, if what I've said resonates in people's hearts, then that should be enough, hopefully, to prompt them to do their own research. They need to, don't follow me. That's the last thing I want, is anybody following me. They need to follow their heart.
Yeah.
That's the important. All these guys that are, you know, on the circuits that are, you know, they're talking, they're these personalities, I'll solve your problems in legal or whatever, and we know certain individuals that are doing that aren't legally trained. They're not even legally trained, but they're doing, oh, follow me, you know, come and see one of my courses, it's only this amount of money, all the other stuff. Magna Carta says cost free.
Yeah.
Right? So you do that as a service commitment. It's cost free, and if people want to give you donations, that's what you get. And that's if people want to hear me, that's what I do it for.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's it. And it's their free will and choice.
And it's very important because no one else is going to be able to fight your battles.
No.
Apart from
we
you.
need lots of people who can establish their own standing. What is true for them? You know, this is the difference between what is true and truth. Truth is your life, what you've lived in. That's what makes you do what you do. That's your life experience. You know, and that's different for me. That's your truth. I've got my truth. You know, but as long as you can stand on it and you've been true to who you really are, to thine own self be true, then we've got a lot in common.
Yeah.
And having a lot in common, that gives us common law, the customs and traditions. You're a mother, there's another mother down the road that you can sit there and talk, and you've got a lot in common, and fathers and all that stuff. These are facts of life. These are what you have in common. It's not about the differences, it's about what we have in common, and standing in that, you know. I mean, the levels of deception are just off the scale. All I'm doing is I'm a bard, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do traditionally, going back 3,000 or 4,000 years or whatever, and I'm just removing the veil.
Well, the thing is, when you stand in your, when you're true, when you are, like you say, working from who you really are, your inner truth, you're standing in it, you're aligning. You know, mistakes are acceptable because people will look at you and say, do you know, everybody's entitled to make a mistake.
Yeah.
You know, everybody's entitled for forgiveness. But when you're on the right side of truth, then you work from a place of, you know, integrity and loyalty, and you apply more morals and honor. And so you can work with that because you're just being honest. It's
Absolutely. And let's go back to the teachings of Esau. Forgiveness.
yeah.
So what happened with the Pope there? He was trying to, like, where was the forgiveness in the Albigensian Crusade against the Cathars? Where was the forgiveness in and unleashing St. Austin with a whole bunch of Saxon mercenaries putting people to the sword if they didn't believe in this new form of so-called Christianity? All they did is they took a product and then they went, oh, right, we need to make this a global product now. So this was just a local product. What we'll do is we'll change the birth date and we'll make it so it's like the sun worshipping equinox thing. Oh, and then we'll have the divine birth thing. Oh, and we'll have the born again thing as well.
Yeah.
And we'll put that together. And then we've got this big corporate conglomerate that can encompass everyone, and I'll be in charge of it, and we'll have our other guys there, and that'll be all right, you know. And that's our world market, and we'll be able to make money on that. You know, we'll charge people, we'll steal their land, we'll do all this, and if people don't want to go along with it, we'll kill them.
Yeah, and that's exactly it, isn't it? Well, thank you so much. Shall we get ready for something to eat? Otherwise, we could speak for absolute hours. Maybe we can do this again in another. It's been about a year, I think.
It's been about a year.
Yeah. But I, as always, I absolutely love talking to you, and I could go on asking more questions, but I'm not going to. I just want to thank everyone for watching, and if you've enjoyed this, please share it. And I will share some of Alan's. If you've got any more work, I will add it to my YouTube. And if people can find you, is there a way that they can find you?
It's well, basically,
You're a bit of a freelancer.
yeah. Well, I don't do it as a
Yeah.
personality or as a corporate thing. I don't.
Well, you just
promote
have to
it.
wait then until the next time.
It's just if people want me to talk, they find a way. I mean, that's how you got in contact.
Yeah, it is.
Isn't
I
it?
know.
There I
I
was
was-
in Stroud.
I know, it was amazing how we got connected. But thank you so much. If you've enjoyed it, do please share this. And, you know, like Alan said, and I've been saying quite a lot, is you've got to know who you are and do the inner work rather than...
Yeah, some doors only open from the inside.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Right, thank you very much. Much love
Okay.
to everyone. Ciao, ciao.